Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we're going to talk about the love of world travel and learning to be okay with being uncomfortable while doing it. Our guest is Jeff Johns, a lifelong adventurer, filmmaker, photographer, and writer who has spent nearly half of his life traveling the globe and living abroad. He currently lives in the Netherlands with his wife and daughters, and his story begins with a deep calling to assist with recovery efforts in Thailand after the 2004 tsunami. As a successful television producer, Jeff has created popular shows for Discovery Channel, National Geographic, and the BBC. Jeff's recent book, Jet Lag Junkie, documents his lifetime of worldwide exploration and the meaning, belonging, and love he found along the way. Jeff, welcome to the campfire.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. It's great to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm so excited. I want to dive right in because you and I got a chance to talk, I don't know, maybe a month ago, 3 weeks ago, and I got a copy of the book since then, right here, Jet Lag Junkie. It is fantastic. I spent the last couple of weeks devouring this over my morning coffee. So I want to go right in for listeners. What is a jet lag junkie?
It's a good question. You know, the hardest thing when you're trying to write a book is trying to figure out, like, what is the title here that sums up what I'm trying to say? And, you know, the tagline that I came up with was Unfiltered Tales of a Compulsive Wanderer. And I think that sort of compulsive wandering and that never-ending quest for more jet lag, because you just want to get on a plane and go anywhere in any time zone, any time of day, really sums it up. So anybody who knows that feeling will instantly, I think, connect with that title.
I love it. And it's such a good book. And it really is. It's a memoir of like a lifelong love of travel and, you know, lots of fun little in the moment stories, but also kind of takes you through this whole like lifelong journey from like where it all began to really where you are now. I'm excited to share this story, but what's like so intriguing to me is just kind of this story behind how it all started. And the tsunami in Thailand of 2004. So I wonder if you could kind of take us back there and tell us what happened.
Yeah, so at the end of 2004, I'm sort of halfway through my sophomore year at college at the University of Redlands, sort of east of Los Angeles. And at this point, I've really just been living in the first month of freshman year for about a year and a half. And I'm just having so much fun. I'm not taking things seriously because of ADHD and everything else, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well. I'm not dedicated to classes or paying attention, and I just don't have a lot of drive. I'm a big dude. I'm a lot of fun, you know, but I'm not really motivated to do much other than just continue to have fun. And I find myself, you know, traveling with my family in the holiday break that Christmas, and I'm at the airport in Dublin, and I just start seeing these horrific news stories on the TVs. I think sitting in Chicago, and I just, for the first time really ever that I could recognize, felt what I imagined was a sense of purpose or meaning, and just thought, I can help. I can pick up a shovel, or I can clean up some debris, or I can do something. And that felt like I didn't have to be smart. I didn't have to be clever. I didn't need to be dedicated to something other than show up and help. And that really set off this spark that, thank goodness, my parents were thrilled to see and very happy to support. And a few weeks later, after getting some, you know, some shots and figuring out some travel plans and everything else, I was on a plane from LA to Phuket, and really had no idea where in the world I was going.
That's crazy. So, well, I want to just kind of recap, make sure that I understand, like for listeners. So you're in college, you're kind of like enjoying the college, the social aspect and the fun part of it, not so much the academic piece.
Correct.
And you're on a, like basically a holiday break with your parents, and this natural disaster happens. And all of a sudden you feel this like calling to just completely shake everything up and take off and go to Thailand to help.
That's what it was. I can't really explain it.
I mean, was any of this like on your radar at all before? Like, I mean, was it literally just like watching something happen on the news?
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't understand why anybody would do any volunteer work. I was a deeply sort of selfish and self-serving person at that time. Everything I was doing was for me. So I surprised myself by thinking, by being motivated enough to, scurry into it. At that point, an internet cafe. There was no Twitter, or I don't even think wasn't Facebook at the time either. And
Yeah.
just Googling how do I get there? Where is Thailand? What can I do? Is there anybody that has set up anything? And luckily was able to piece together enough that a few weeks later that there I was on a plane.
You watch this news story. You're in the process of traveling. I think you said you were in Chicago at that point.
Yeah.
So you're watching this news story, and it's literally like 2 weeks later, you're on a plane to go to Thailand.
Yeah, it was a little bit longer than that. I needed to find the right organization, but I found this website that someone had thrown up that just said, if you want to come and help, we're a small group of volunteers, and we're at this small hotel in this little village called Bang Tao, in the north side of Phuket, and we've got free hotel rooms and food for anybody who wants to show up. And my parents were so thrilled to see a drive in me at all that they were like, okay, how do we support this kind of strange thing, but it seems good. And my college professor at the time, mentor, college counselor at the time, was kind of like, yeah, I've seen you do pretty much nothing for a year and a half, so I will absolutely greenlight you taking a semester off. So at that point, little planning went into place, and got a couple jabs, and that was really it. It was like, let's drop out for a semester and see if I can go do some good on the other side of the world.
So I want to stay in those moments, or even just those days. Like you saw this news story. Prior to seeing that news story, like what was the plan for the next? This was over like a holiday break. So like, was the plan to just go back to school like the next when the holiday break was over?
I was living in the master bedroom of like a cookie cutter 5-bedroom house that my friends and I had rented in this new build neighborhood right off campus, and having the greatest time of my life. But it was just Groundhog Day. Every day and weekend was just the same over and over again. And at this point, it had been a year and a half, so I was very aware. And I had been telling my parents, like, I don't think this is a good use of tuition money. Like, I'm having a lot of fun, but I got to be honest, at this point, like,
Yeah.
I don't really know what I'm doing. So I was aware of that, but I was having so much fun. But then this really just sort of snapped something in me and thought, okay, let me chase this.
What were those conversations like with your college counselors, like talking to the college and your roommates, and like to let them know, like, hey, I'm going to do this thing?
Yeah, I mean, everybody thought I was pretty crazy. My parents, luckily, really supported me. They really did. I mean, they could have put the end to this 20 years ago before it ever got started and said, no, stay in school. There's absolutely no way we're putting our 20-year-old son, on a one-way ticket to the other side of the world and funding whatever weird adventure this is. But kudos to them. Kudos to my college counselor who said, go for it. He really, I think, also just saw something in me that he could tell this would be hugely beneficial.
Yeah. So Jeff, like one of the things about this podcast that I love to explore is this idea of the call to adventure. It sounds like when you saw that news story, like the call to adventure, like just came up in you, it sort of bubbled up in you. And I just wonder if like we could like go into those moments when you first felt that call to adventure. And if you could sort of describe like, what did it feel like? And what was like, what
Yeah.
kind of thoughts were popping in your head? Like, kind of take us through that.
I think for me, it was this instant recognition that the world inside my head just got infinitely bigger. I was living in a bubble inside of a bubble, right? I'm in Southern California, that's a bubble. I'm in a college campus, that's a bubble. I'm inside essentially a dorm and a half in my house, which is a bubble, right? Super insulated. And when something happened like this, it just popped that bubble, shattered my sort of perception of the world. And all of a sudden, I'm hyper aware about the needs of other people who I don't know, I don't understand, I don't know where they are, but I'm now aware the world is that much bigger. And there's people out there, and some of them could use some help. And then it just became somewhat of an obsession, for lack of a better word. I need to get there and do this now. And I think that is a really common thing with travel. It's like once it's kind of taking the red pill or the blue pill. Once you make that decision and you go see what's on the other side, it's pretty impossible to forget the world is that's out there, you know? When you
Yeah.
start having those experiences that can be such an adrenaline filled time and so transformational that it's very hard to ignore.
You mentioned early when I asked that question that you felt this when you saw that news story and you this idea of like going to help in Thailand, it gave you this sense of purpose. What I picked up on was like sort of this, I can do this. Like this is something I can do. There's people that need my help and I can go serve a purpose bigger than myself. Like were you sort of feeling any sort of void at that time?
Absolutely. I mean, it felt like I could provide value, which I didn't feel like I was providing in it really anything that I was doing, right? I think I mentioned in the book that I ended up taking the same intro to painting class 2 or 3 semesters in a row before, because they kept changing the professor of the class before the administration told me you can only get credit for this class once. I was just kind of just doing the bare minimum. And because there was just nothing that lit my fire that I was really passionate about, I'd pretend and try to, I saw all my friends and roommates who were pre-med or who were really into all these different things. And I thought, I don't, what is that thing for me? And I think my parents thought, well, the longer you stay in college, at some point it will hit you. But for me, it hit just staring at that television screen in the airport in O'Hare that said 300,000 people dead. And I was like, whoa, this is that feeling.
So it hit while you were in college, just in a very different way than you thought it was going to hit.
Indeed.
Can you take us to like arriving in Thailand and just kind of give us a rundown of kind of what those first days and weeks were like?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll never forget going to the airport, going to LAX with a couple of my college roommates, and we had a great time, laughing in the hallway and all this traffic, and went and had dinner. And I think I had like an 11 p.m. flight on Cathay Pacific from LAX, an overnight flight. And I remember sitting in the airport in Taipei at like 5 a.m. on a layover in this absolutely abandoned terminal with my red little Discman, listening to music and thinking, what on earth am I doing? And at that point, it was way too late to go back. I was literally on a layover and thinking, of course, I've made a terrible mistake. I had a great, fun life, with all my college friends, and I didn't. At that point, I realized, hey, man, you should have probably researched what religion or what the currency was or what the customs of Thailand are or what is anything. Like I knew nothing. And when I got off the airplane in Phuket, I'm just dripping with sweat. At this point, I'm well north of 300 pounds, and I've got this backpack and this goofy grin on, and I'm I'll never forget this Thai woman bowing to me at the bottom of this escalator when I got into the airport. I was so uncomfortable. I had no idea what to do, where to go. I had the name of Bang Tao Beach scribbled on a little piece of paper smudged in my pocket, and went to an ATM, tried to get out some amount of money. I had no idea what the exchange rate was, so I just took out some, got in a taxi, and gave this guy whatever money he wanted, and as long as he could get me to whatever was scribbled on this piece of paper. And I just sat in the back of that cab bouncing along, just thinking, what have I done? But it was absolutely exhilarating. Absolutely exhilarating. I wasn't thinking about needing to find direction at that point, which had been a weighing, gnawing thought on my mind for, a couple of years at college, because I was doing something. And that was a huge relief on its own, accompanied with a new sort of, where am I?
Hey everyone, it's Scott here. This podcast is a passion project for me because I absolutely love adventure. And it's thanks to the effort of my residential real estate team here in Charlotte, North Carolina, that many of you know as the W Realty Group, that this podcast gets funded. This awesome group of people have unmatched levels of competence and caring for our clients. If you know of anyone looking to buy or sell a home, our team serves the Charlotte, North Carolina market, but we can also help you find an agent anywhere throughout the US or Canada through our highly connected network. When you support our real estate business, you are also supporting this podcast. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your referrals. As I said in the intro that you kind of mentioned it on the back cover of your book, like this is sort of the first experience with like becoming okay with being uncomfortable.
Yeah. And sort of radical acceptance, because you can't dip a toe in, right? You're jumping in head first, doing a cannonball, and like whatever happens, happens. That is a feeling that I ended up becoming quite addicted to, because it always ended with learning about myself and learning about the world and gaining a perspective. There was always value at the other end of that. And I recognized, pretty early on, this is the teacher. This is the teacher that I've been looking for. I didn't find it in a classroom, but as long as I keep getting on airplanes, I'm going to keep learning some lessons.
Jeff, this was a major world natural disaster that happened, and you went, and I think like for a lot of us that are, in the US and even Europe, it just seems so distant that like we know it happened, but you got to see it firsthand. Can you just tell us a little bit about like what you saw when you got there, and what were the recovery efforts and the assistance efforts like that you got to participate in?
Yeah, the first thing that was so odd is that, of course, everybody pictures tidal waves and tsunamis as all encompassing and engulfing, everything in its sight. And it does that for, a few hundred feet, but that's it. So driving through Phuket, even though it is a relatively small island, everything looked totally normal, completely fine until I got close to the coast. And then you'd start seeing washed out buildings. And even then, it was usually the ground floor and the second floor.
Yeah.
Anything above that, totally untouched. And this whole thing happened, within a matter of a few minutes, and then the sea receded, it had just ruined absolutely everything. But as I got closer to the coast, you could start to see these catastrophic effects of this wave that had come in out of nowhere and just absolutely destroyed hundreds of thousands of lives. And entire businesses and homes were it was like everything was put in a blender, twisted, ripped, shredded, and then just dispersed, out in the open across everything. And that's really where the taxi kind of stopped and said, "You're here, get out, good luck."
Yeah.
And I was just sort of standing there, maybe 100 feet from the ocean in this teeny little village, just thinking, again, what am I doing here? But I need to be here.
Right. So you connected, there was an organization that you connected with that was sort of like project managing some of these efforts. What were some of the things that you did?
Yeah, so on a day-to-day basis, I mean, there was an outpouring of support for this, right? There weren't that many volunteers that physically went, but there was a lot of support, people trying to organize help. But there was this sort of merry band of misfits that showed up. There was an Irish couple and a British couple and this random Australian guy and another American who'd been traveling somewhere else in Asia at the time and came down. And we just kind of formed this bizarre little group where, in a situation like that, you hyper bond pretty quick because you're going through somewhat of a collective trauma, but you're also all sharing this unbelievable transformative experience together. So we all sort of shared rooms in this little guest house along the beach and wake up, have our meals together. And then we'd walk down the street to the various little projects that we had kind of sussed out in the community. A lot of it was just cleaning up debris into piles. A lot of it was helping local communities, we were doing projects where we were trying to reconstruct what were the roads and what were the names of the streets and working with the locals. Can we put up street signs so that somebody has any idea of where they're going, right? Things like this, putting addresses back on buildings. And after a while that progressed to, okay, what can we help rebuild? Do we have money to purchase some new window frames or maybe some new, cinder blocks so we can rebuild a wall, things like that. And we just sort of slowly pieced projects together that we could manage. And a few people ended up flying in, and a sort of a surly old Canadian farmer sold his ranch in somewhere in Canada and flew over and showed up by himself with all of his tools and said, "I know how to build stuff." So we relied on him, and everybody kind of pitched in what they could, and we did the best that we could.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's a different scale. It's still devastating. Western North Carolina, where I live, just recently went through Hurricane Helene, and there was a lot of damage, and they're still rebuilding there. I think one of the things that I've noticed just being in different social media groups and kind of seeing what's happening there is like this sense of community and like people coming together for the rebuilding, and communities become stronger through these sort of things. Like what did you witness in that regard?
There's an incredible humanity that comes with being that vulnerable and uncomfortable because everything is stripped away, right? So when you don't even really have language to communicate, you're using body language, and everybody is stripped down to the basics, right? You all want shelter and food and love. That's really what we all want at the end of the day, no matter what. And when you're in a situation like that where none of the little things in the world matter other than finding those things, it's so easy to connect with the other humans around you, regardless of where you're all from and what you've gone through in life. So seeing that in those Thai people and their resilience and their kindness and their smiles, that was also an incredible feeling of purpose, right? That really solidified, okay, I did think there was a reason to do this, and now I feel that sense of purpose.
Yeah. So I go back to you looking at a screen in Chicago, feeling this calling, right? And now, like, you're there, you're helping. As you reflect back to that sort of connection that you had watching that screen, like, how did that sort of calling and that feeling like I can contribute, that like this feels very purposeful. How did that sort of connect to like the actual reality of being there?
The reality was 1,000 times more incredible or stronger than the feeling to go in the first place. I mean, it just shattered. I mean, it was a massively pivotal moment in my life, right? It's when I started taking pictures and seeing sort of the power that imagery can have in storytelling, and it really had me rethinking, just okay, what am I doing in life? What really gets me going, and where can I, provide value? And after that trip, I'd only bought a ticket, I think, to go for 3 weeks originally, and I ended up there for 4 months, changing my flight and coming home months later. And then, ironically, 3 months after I got home was Katrina in Mississippi, and that same group at that point had formed this organization and had said we're going to Mississippi, and I got my car from LA and drove overnight and showed up in Biloxi to do the same thing, right? Figuring if I can go across the world to go help people, I can do the same in my own country.
Yeah. So the tsunami in Thailand kind of set you off on this. I think you even said like for a while you were sort of chasing natural disasters to help.
Yep. And I did it with a lot of the same people that I would just not see for 6 or 8 months. And then I'm in a teeny village in the southern part of the Philippines in some island because they've been ravaged by a cyclone. And there's the same group, like literally 5, 6, 8 people of the same group that I was with in Thailand. And they'd kind of just been backpacking in between. And then the next disaster hit, and there they were,
Yeah.
met up with almost the exact same group of people in Bangladesh as well. And this was over the course of a couple of years, but that really exposed me to not only the meaning and value of interacting, with people in need, but also just the learning and perspective that comes in ending up in these very far flung corners of the world. And I realized, well, it's great to go help when there is a disaster, but there doesn't need to be one to just put yourself in these other communities and cultures. You can just go do
Yeah.
that.
Well, so this is what I think is so cool because, the story starts out with this college kid that's kind of feeling like maybe a little bit lost, not really feeling like I'm providing much value. I don't really know him. And then you have this inner calling and you listened to it. Even though people thought you were a little wackadoodle, right? You got on a plane and you went, and it was really like about service and this feeling of like purpose. But you discovered this love of travel in the meantime.
Yeah, exactly. That was a byproduct.
Yeah. So then the rest of the story unfolds from there because the rest of the book is like, all of these incredible travel adventures that sort of ensue after that.
Yeah, so I think that whole time, like everything that we just talked about, is I think is chapters like 1 and 2.
Yeah, exactly.
And then at that point, going back to California, it's I went and got my degree in photojournalism. I ended up dropping out of the university that I was in, going to a specific school for visual journalism and documentary filmmaking because I wanted to tell stories. And I thought if I can pair together traveling and telling stories, this is something that I really am passionate about. And I ended up getting much more into documentary filmmaking and finding stories that I found compelling of people who had voices that needed to be heard or shared. And I thought, whatever I can do to help amplify those will again be of value. But it wasn't very long, after I graduated, that I again left left LA, and that time on a one-way ticket with a girlfriend at the time back to Phuket, ironically. And I haven't moved back to the US since, and that was almost 14 years ago, which I did not intend. But here we are.
You said 14 years basically of living abroad. Where are some of the places that you've lived? And by the way, for listeners, you can get the whole story in Jet Lag Junkie. I highly recommend. We're not going to even scratch the surface on all of the adventures that happen inside this book. So highly recommend that listeners get a copy of this. But maybe you can give us a kind of an overview of some of the places that you've lived abroad.
Yeah. So while I was in school in Southern California, I worked on some international documentary projects, and I spent 3 months living in Santiago, Chile, which was fascinating. Spent the same 3 months living in India the next year, telling stories. And when I ultimately left Los Angeles and moved back to the only place where I had a big piece of my heart out in the world, which was Phuket, and moved back there, again, aiming to tell stories. And I was able to do a lot of that there, but the relationship that I was in at the time fizzled, and she moved back to LA, and there I was kind of alone. And at this point, this is now 10 years after I was there for the tsunami. I'm there again. A decade later, I'm lost. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I've got a couple $100 in my bank account, no job, and I'm just in this efficiency studio apartment thinking, what on earth am I doing when I turn 30 on my own there? And through a series of random occurrings, I get this job offer in Dubai to head up a web TV startup. And I think this is a great opportunity. I don't know anything about the Middle East or the culture whatsoever, but hey, this is my sweet spot. Let's show up and just see what happens. So I arrived to Dubai, and I mean, I don't know what I was expecting, but it was exactly what I thought it would be, and totally different. I mean, it's such a unique place. And as fate would have it, I met my now wife about a week after I moved there, who had moved from France to get her master's degree in Dubai. And it was just this incredible spark between the two of us, and we instantly knew there was a connection, and we kind of wanted to put it to the test. And she kind of wanted to push me to see how far I was going to go. And I was kind of waiting for her to call my bluff. And I told her, well, I moved here from Thailand. And she said, well, take me to Thailand. And so I said, pinky promise? She's like, yep, done. And a few weeks later, we were on our way to Phuket, and I was taking her there and for New Year's. And it was this sort of a whirlwind romance that happened, and travel was sort of the accelerator to let's see if it's serious. Travel does such an amazing job of putting you in situations that really test you and really, let you know if you're compatible with somebody. You're stressed, you're in unfamiliar environments, you can be uncomfortable, things go wrong often. And it's like, let's just go see how we deal with this together. And that ended up, starting this, absolute whirlwind, 5-6 year period between Anne and I, where we realized that Dubai is set in such a unique place in the world that, yes, you're in the middle of essentially a massive desert, but I think 2/3 of the world's population lives within an 8-hour flight of Dubai, right? You have all of Africa, India, China, Asia, and Europe. I mean, it's such centrally located. So we started doing these little weekend trips. At that point, the weekend in Dubai was Friday, Saturday, with the days off. So Thursday night, we'd find an overnight flight somewhere. And the first one we did was Beirut. We showed up in Lebanon on a Friday morning at, blurry eyed, and said, okay, we've got 2 days to explore. And Anne said, well, why don't we film a video? You've got this video knowledge, and I'm head of social media, the company that we're working at, and let's do something fun. It's a fun project we can do together. So she said, let's film a 48 hours in Beirut video. I thought, cool, let's do it. And that ended up being the first of what would be 25 or so 48-hour travel guides that we did to increasingly sort of unique and off the beaten path destinations in and around the Middle East, and then broader. And that's really where this increasing adventure just continued to take us.
Yeah, I love it. So you just kind of foreshadowed a little bit about your social media channel, What Doesn't Suck.
Yes, we were in the back bar, back booth of a dimly lit Irish pub or English pub in Dubai, and we were talking about maybe starting a little blog, with some travel stuff, and I jokingly said, "What doesn't suck?" Because as a reference to all of the negative things on the internet, right? If you look at any YouTube videos, 9 out of 10 comments or 99 out of 100 comments are negative, right? People always want to leave negative comments. So I was just jokingly saying, well, what if we just focus on what doesn't suck? Everybody knows that there's things that can go wrong and everything else, but like, let's really just highlight the joys of travel and not play characters, but sort of assume the personalities of ourselves of being sort of innocent, carefree. Let's show up and just kind of see what happens. And that is how we really love to travel, as opposed to meticulously reading articles and itineraries and planning out schedules and everything else. We thought, let's just jump on an airplane. We'll land in Armenia. We'll have 2 days. Let's go talk to people, see what there is to do, explore, get lost, and really prove to the world that the world is a nice place. And that was really our goal. I think I liken myself to a golden retriever puppy a couple times in the book, and just say like that sort of youthful, innocent, sort of dumb, personality, I think, is just such a fantastic way to travel. You're kind of open to everything.
Yeah. And so many of these adventures that you and Anne had are documented on What Doesn't Suck. Before you guys met, like as part of this whole sort of chasing natural disasters and then starting to travel, like I'd love for you to comment just on sort of the perceptions that people have of different places and then your actual experience of some of those same places. And then there's one particular story that it's just because I loved it so much in the book. I would love to hear you talk about it and for listeners to hear it as well. But yeah, can you talk a little bit about some of the places that you went and kind of the difference between your perception of them versus like maybe media portrayal of it?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's so beautiful about the world is that no two experiences are the same. And you will talk to people, often, if somebody has traveled quite a lot, the question you get asked all the time is, where's your favorite country?
Mm.
If I could only go to one place that you've been to, like, where's that one place, right? But people have drastically different experiences, and I have drastically different experiences when I revisit places again, right? And I keep in my mind exactly what this place was like when I went once, and then you go back and you go, this is a completely different side of this country, of this culture. But there are places in the world, I think, at least for me, where, for lack of a better word, I just connect with. And there's some where you go, this is a beautiful place. I respect this culture. It's fantastic, but I just don't click with it. For me, I've done lots of travel in South America. My parents live in Ecuador and they absolutely love it. I think it's a fantastic collection of countries, and I've loved exploring them. It doesn't connect with me. But Southeast Asia, right? Of course, a huge part of my heart is sitting on the beach in Bangtao, because of the transformative experiences, that I've had there. So it's interesting when people get these preconceived notions of these places through movies or television, and that's just what lives in their head unconsciously, and that's what that place must be, right? And for me, I think in one of the later chapters, Anne plans a trip for us and doesn't tell me where we're going, and I get on an airplane and suddenly, have this goal of like, can we get out of the airplane and still have me not know where we are? This is like absolutely like, unicorn of a travel experience. It doesn't happen. And we managed to get to the airport and landed, and they said, welcome to Tirana. And I thought, where's Tirana? She said, we're in Albania. I thought, what on earth are we doing in Albania, But I bring this up because if you were to ask me what is Albania, it's every Liam Neeson movie, and people in gloves with the fingers cut off eating bread over like fires and trash cans. Like, this is just what's been brainwashed into every bad guy Eastern European movie. But she was like, well, we're here to hike the Peak of the Balkans Trail, which is essentially the Alps mountain range from Europe that continues and extends all the way down through Albania. Absolutely blew my mind, completely changed my perception of an entire area of the world where I just had this sort of cliche thing stuck in my head that I wasn't even aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a number of conversations with people that have made it very clear that like the world, you go to these places that seem scary based on those portrayals, but like 99% of the time, the people are as nice as they can be, and it's just fabulous experience. Every once in a while, you have a Hollywood experience, and you have one of those. I would love for you to share the poker story.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a cyclone that ravaged southern Bangladesh.
Yeah.
in 2008. And I was in school at the time in Los Angeles working on my visual journalism degree. And the way that the school worked was that we did 7 weeks on, 1 week off, 7 weeks on, 1 week off year round. And I think there was a holiday wrapped in there. So I think there was about 9 or 10 days. And I thought, if I plan this right, I can get on an airplane the day, as soon as class gets out, I can fly overnight. I had a connection in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and then I can get to Bangladesh. And that was my goal. But the connection in Kuala Lumpur was 12 hours. And I thought, the airline was like, we're so sorry about this. I was like, this is fantastic. I've got 12 hours to go explore Malaysia. I've never been there before. Let's go see the Petronas Towers. Let's go to the food hawker stalls and, eat some amazing street food. And as I get off the train, just sort of at where the busy stop that everybody got off at, I thought, let's go get lost. And I'm walking around and these two guys out of nowhere start asking me about my shoes, which I thought was just so bizarre. Again, I'm a big guy at this point. I'm wearing these bright neon skater shoes, so I look like an idiot. And they're just asking about these shoes. And they started this conversation. And I have only been met with good at this point traveling, and I'm just filled with this overabundance of love that everybody is kind and welcoming, and the world's a fantastic place. And they say, oh, you're from California. Amazing. My sister is going to move there in a couple of weeks. She's a nurse and she knows nothing about America. And I'm sure she would love to ask you some questions. Would you come over to our house for lunch? And I thought, there's a little bit in the back of my mind that's like, this is kind of weird. But the other 99% of me is like, oh, the travel gods have given you an incredible experience. Of course, go have lunch with some locals. What could be better? So we jump in a car and we're driving through the city, and I noticed this bright yellow billboard. And then about 10 minutes later, I noticed this bright yellow billboard, and I'm thinking, where? And these guys are just, chatting nonstop in Malaysian. I have no idea what they're saying. And I'm just sort of notice I'm clutching my backpack a little bit tighter. We finally get to sort of the outskirts of the city. There's less traffic, less horns. It's quiet. We pull into this sort of strip of townhouses in what kind of looks like an industrial area. And I go in and they sort of make a lunch, but there's no women there. And then it starts to feel kind of weird, right? I would have felt safer if there was a little old lady around and a couple young, women who looked like nurses, but. Yeah. They told me pretty quickly, our grandmother has had to go to the hospital, and unfortunately our sister's not here. And it was just me and 6 or 7 Malaysian guys, and I thought, okay, this is strange. But again, I'm a big guy. I don't, I'm not fearing for my physical safety at this point, but I'm looking at the clock thinking, okay, I do have a connecting flight I need to make in a number of hours. Where is this going? And I sort of get placed in this room with this guy named Otto who has an eye patch. I mean, this couldn't be more like comedic. I'm like looking at this whole thing going like, this is the most insane situation. He's watching some like Rambo movie on the TV that's all static. He's smoking a cigarette, this dimly lit room. He's this big sort of sweaty, one-eyed. It was so bizarre. And all the other kind of guys that I was with had kind of left. And like so many of the houses here on the ground floor, it's kind of open, but there's sort of a chain link gate sort of at the front of the house. So that had been closed and locked, which I thought, okay, maybe that's just sort of custom, but where'd those other guys go? And then this guy Otto snaps off the TV and says, do you play poker? I said, nope, absolutely not. Like, there's no way I'm going to start playing poker with you. And he goes, oh, come here. And he sort of ushers me into this room off the kitchen that's very dark, has no windows, literally has one light bulb. And he closes this door, and this door is thick. I mean, it looks like a bank vault door. And there's just one table and 2 chairs and a little cabinet with a drawer. And we sit down on both sides of this table, and he takes out a deck of cards and starts telling me about, and I'm like, dude, I don't play poker anyway. I'm certainly not about to try to learn with you. The whole time he just does not stop talking and telling me about how he's a dealer at a casino, and he works with this madam from Brunei, Miss Abadasis. He's like painted this picture of this sort of mysterious woman who's sick in the head because she's obsessed with gambling. And he said, started calling her all these terrible things and said, she promised that, we were working together and we'd make all this money and she would give me this much and she didn't give me anything. And, I'm going to kill her if I see her again and blah, blah, blah. And then he says, but if you learn with me, I'll show you how we can cheat and we can go back to the casino. We can make a ton of money. And I'm like, okay, I understand at this point, there's some sort of a scam here, but I don't understand what it is yet. And I'm very, very curious. what it is, right? And I'm living in the moment. My heart's beating, but I'm strangely calm because I'm confident that I'm not physically in danger. I just am fascinated by what is this scam that I've, been absolutely like walked into with open arms. And then there's a pounding at the door. And he very quickly shoves a couple $100 bills into my pocket. And he says, do exactly this. And we're going to, play this card game. And he opens the door and this woman is there. And I'm like flabbergasted that this woman he's described is actually standing at the door. She's got these jet black eyes. She's caked in makeup, got these comically large sunglasses. And she comes and sits down and he, starts dealing these cards, and he's tapping his fingers and my foot, and he's trying to do all these signal things. And I've got his money in my pocket, and I'm thinking, this is so bizarre. And I reached down into my backpack, and in those times we had these, they weren't flip phones, but it wasn't the iPhone yet. And so it had the touchpad, and there was a time where I could do a text one-handed without looking, because each number had 3 letters, and I knew exactly how to get to everywhere on the phone, just through memory. And I managed to turn the phone on in my backpack and scroll to the ringtone section and play one of the ringtones. And I acted, just immediately, oh my God, how am I getting a phone call at this time? I'm trying to play this game of poker. What I was doing was I had seen a billboard that had Barack Obama's face on it when we were driving through the streets. And I had flashed back to this in this moment when I turned my phone on and thought, I don't know if Obama is coming to Asia. At this point, he was just a senator, right? But let me pretend that I'm somehow involved with Obama's forward team, something, and hope that they don't know the difference. So I pretended to pick up the phone call and pretended to be talking to somebody on the staff that had just landed. And there was a very important staff meeting that I needed to be at. And I sort of acted like this was a really big deal. And if I wasn't there, it was going to be a big problem, right? Magically, like everything paused. And they opened this door that had been closed and locked, and these guys who had sort of disappeared came back, and the dogs started barking, and I got in the car, and now clutching my backpack extremely tightly, and Otto just reached in the car door without saying a word, took the 2 $100 bills out of my pocket. And I mean, it was just so bizarre. And within a few minutes, driving back through the traffic, the sound returned to the world, and my heart rate started to, to drop a little bit. And I was back into this gigantic mall, just standing there thinking, what on earth happened? I just got a little bit too close to the dark side.
A very strange experience, but you made it through perfectly okay. And now here you are, you get to tell this story to us. I loved that story so much. And there's so much of that in this book. People have to get a copy of it and check it out. It's so good. I wanted to ask you, like, as we kind of fast forward a little bit, because one thing I also thought was really interesting in the book was sort of the stark difference between Thailand and Dubai, because you lived in both places. And it seemed like in Thailand, like you could live on a shoestring budget, whereas Dubai was like the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I was curious for you just quickly what that was like.
Yeah. I mean, living in Thailand is, after a couple of years, I was getting very tired of being considered a tourist everywhere I went, right? Because it's such a huge tourist hotspot, one of the biggest in the world. So while I really wanted to integrate myself with the local culture and the Thais, I took Thai language lessons, but every time I tried to speak Thai, it was like laughable. I did have some good Thai friends, and I had some Thai friends who were there from when I was there a decade earlier. But, at a certain point, I didn't need much to survive, but I also didn't have much. So I was living in an apartment that cost $150 a month. It was like 300 square feet, teeny. I could touch almost all the walls from anywhere in the apartment. I was driving a little motorbike that cost 10 or 15 bucks a month, and I'd put in a gallon of gas every week. And I mean, for $1, it was nothing. And I was just eating, pad thai and noodles on the beach every day. I took this job in Dubai, and I think I arrived with $837 in my bank account, and I thought, I'm good. And I get there, and they say, well, you need to pay rent up front for the entire year.
Whoa.
I thought, oh no. And so the rent for 1 month was far more money than I had in my entire bank account, and I was supposed to come up with rent for an entire year.
Wow.
Which is how they used to do it. You'd date checks. I mean, I didn't have a bank account, let alone a checks. It was just like sort of laughable, and everything in Dubai was so expensive. After working for a couple of months, you get a little bit of, of money, and then it's all kind of relative. But that was a huge slap in my face. But Dubai is really good at taking all your money as well, right? They lure you in because there's no income tax. So you get this feeling that you've got 30-40% more than you should, and you spend it. So after about 2 years in Dubai, I did not have a single dirham to my name, that I had saved, because everything came in, everything went out, and that was, starkly different than living in Thailand.
Oh man, I mean, there's so much we could just keep going. But as we kind of like start wrapping up here, I do want to talk about, obviously this idea of becoming okay with getting uncomfortable. But a lot of this, it kind of goes back to like the very beginning of the story. This idea of like questioning, like, what value am I bringing to my life? And then feeling this call to adventure. But there's a quote on the back of your book that struck me. And it says, through deeply personal struggles with imposter syndrome, severe ADHD, anxiety, body image, and burnout, Jeff's journey reveals issues seldom discussed in a world that worships perfection and happiness. And I wonder if we could just touch on that for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the videos that we made for What Doesn't Suck, we very consciously decided, let's focus on just the positive, right? But that increasingly led to only focusing on the positive, and creating this sort of image that everything is perfect, right? And at the same time, we're posting things on Instagram, and at this point, influencer is not really a term yet. It's just kind of becoming popularized. But the more that we traveled, the more it became apparent that everybody who was doing the same was trying to take these perfect pictures, that are not at all reflective of what it may be like to be there. But I think beyond the physical, I also just, the more I reflected on all of our travels, I think we really said everything that we wanted to say in the video format, because our goal was to inspire people to get out of their comfort zone and go travel. That's the first step. Just go travel.
Yeah.
But after, Anne and I stopped traveling and moved from Dubai to Amsterdam, I thought there's still more stories to tell. Let's scratch, we've scratched the surface. Let's go a layer deeper. And that's why, I really wanted to write these stories and just be very vulnerable, because I think there's a lot of power in vulnerability. And that's something that I think a lot of people can connect to, more than just, the sort of picture perfect aspect of a lot of this. So I get very personal and talk a lot about, body image issues and the ADHD, that I was dealing with for many years, not quite sure what I was dealing with, and sort of how I overcame those things. But I think there's power in being vulnerable. And I think it's something that a lot of people can connect with, or at least I hope so.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like as a teaser, I mean, one of the things when even before I read the book, you told me that you see travel as a teacher. And I'm just curious, like specific to you and just sort of as a teaser to the book, could you share like maybe on the ADHD, like how travel has helped you to manage it?
Yeah, so I think, one of the things I said earlier was about how every time you visit a place, it can be a completely new place, right? And I think that for me, what I learned over time was that travel continued to teach me the lessons that I needed to learn when I needed to learn them, even if I needed to learn them over and over and over again, right? But travel has this amazing quality of sort of putting you face to face with your problems. Even though I was extremely stubborn, I knew as long as I kept traveling, I would continue to be faced with these lessons that I'd have to learn. And one of those lessons was, hey, dude, maybe it's time to stop traveling. Maybe it's time to take the things that you've said you've learned and actually try to piece them together, and, have some discipline, and try, be motivated, and try to be organized, and, try to get a real job, right? Like these were all the things that travel continued to teach me. And for me with the ADHD, the act of travel really calmed my like hyperactive mind. I think for many people, when they're at home, their mind is calm. The idea of traveling can bring anxiety, because it's a new place and it's uncomfortable and what will happen. And that makes me nervous and I don't like it. For me, it was the opposite. At home, I had this uncomfortable feeling because my mind was racing a million miles an hour, but I wasn't doing anything with that input. It was just like this building anxiety. When I traveled and got on a plane and I had no idea where I was, all of that went away. Even when I'm sitting with Otto, I'm not thinking, do I have health insurance? Is that on auto renewal? Did I turn off the stove? I should probably work on this thing. That's not like all of that's gone. I'm just in the moment. I just need to survive. Right. So travel kind of provided that white noise that just sort of dulled out this like overactive thinking and just allowed me to be calm in a situation where for many people they may not be calm at all.
I love that so much. And I think I want to finish with one last story that's relevant to you in your life right now, because again, I come back to the purpose of this podcast. And I think a lot of what you're doing, especially like with What Doesn't Suck, is like encouraging people to get outside, encouraging people to go travel. And we've seen a lot of people that are fearful, or they look at somebody like you that just got on a plane and went to Thailand to help with the tsunami efforts, and just like kind of putting yourself in these precarious situations, like, oh, I could never do that, that just seems like crazy. And but yet you've had all of these experiences in life, and you found yourself back at home, safe, comfortable. And just last week, what happened?
It was about 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, and my daughters, before the sun went down, we decided to go to the playground around the corner, and went down the slide with my oldest 4-year old on my lap, and snapped my leg in half, and ended up in an ambulance, and spent 5 days in the hospital, and had to have emergency surgery. And
Mm.
it's been 20 years of adventure travel, and I haven't really had any problem at all that I can think of. I've bought travel insurance, everywhere, just in case, of course, and never had to use it. And here I am, a couple minutes from home on the bike, and break my leg for the first time. And things can happen anywhere.
Yeah, I hope it's not too raw. I know that this just happened for you a couple of weeks ago. I know you're probably still experiencing pain, but I'm just kind of curious if you've reflected on this at all, and kind of like see any of meaning in that. Like it is kind of interesting that you've had so many travel experiences with no issues, and then when you do, it's at the park right down the street.
Ultimately is a beautiful sort of thing that happened. And I will look back on breaking my leg always as a gift, because and it's, I know it sounds so cliche to say that, but when your mobility is taken away from you, and you can no longer put your children to sleep or pick them up when they come running at you, and all you want to do is go show them the world, and show them, the lessons and the adventure, and instill that in them, and that's all taken from you in a second, and you understand what it's like to just not be able to do anything at all. That's an incredible gift, right? So any opportunity that I have to travel with my girls, and to be able to walk, it's the little things, that are so easy to take for granted. And this was one of those freak accidents that just happened totally randomly, but it will ultimately be a beneficial thing that happened in my life, and one of those chapter markers that will fuel even more, adventure and meaning and purpose in the travels that we get to experience together.
So you and Anne were obviously in the midst of traveling when, your first daughter came along. And I'm just curious, like, now you're a dad, how has that changed your whole kind of adventure mindset?
Travel looks a little different now, as I'm sure you know as well, right? We can no longer just travel with a backpack and carry on and do whatever flight times we want. But traveling with just Ann and I was fantastic. Doing that with our girls is something on a whole new level. We went to Barcelona a few weeks ago, and in the book, I tell a story about going to Copenhagen with Stella when she was about 3, and just having this, amazingly like emotional realization that this is the whole reason that I've been traveling, is to
Yeah,
not learn these lessons for myself, but to be able to instill them and impart them on,
love it.
on my children. And, Stella will run up to me constantly and say, "Daddy, I want to go on an adventure." And for her, that could be walking to the grocery store. But this idea of adventure is something that she brings up all the time. We had a trip planned to Krakow, her and I and my father, for a week, a couple days after this injury happened, which of course we've had to postpone. But we constantly have trips and adventures planned, whether it's an hour away or on the other side of the world. And that being able to do that with my girls is the greatest thing in the world.
So awesome. I totally agree with that, by the way. I also have two girls. Jeff, you have like such an epic story. It's filled with adventure, filled with just like sit on the edge of your seat, just waiting to find out what's going to happen next. Hollywood's going to pick up on your story at some point. And when they do, I want to know who's going to be the Hollywood actor that's going to play you in your movie.
Such an impossible question. I go back to that idea of like a silly golden retriever. So thinking like a Seth Rogen or an Adam Sandler or a Ben Stiller, like, someone who shows up and is lovable, but sometimes naive, and things happen to them, right?
I love it.
I love the Adventures of Walter Mitty. I love that movie with Ben Stiller and just the situations that he finds himself in traveling. And so, yeah, I think someone like that.
Love it. What's your movie going to be called?
It would be Jet Lag Junkie is a good title.
I like it a lot.
But another title that I was thinking of is Am I There Yet? Instead of Are We There Yet? Which is, of course, what my daughters say constantly. But I think also, as someone who has read the book, I think you would agree that Am I There Yet is
great.
somewhat of a good title.
I love that. Am I There Yet? Love this. Jeff, this has been awesome. So if people want to find out more about you, if they want to get a copy of the book, if they want to check out What Doesn't Suck, like what's the best way for people to get to know you a little bit more, connect with you?
Yeah, follow at What Doesn't Suck on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. All of our 48-hour guides are up on YouTube if you want to watch them. We've got videos from Tajikistan, Serbia, Everest Base Camp, Greenland. We really had a blast making those and hope that they can share some inspiration. And if you want to pick up a copy of Jet Lag Junkie, of course, you can order the ebook and paperback on Amazon and whatdoesn'tsuck.com. I keep it updated with some bookstores all across the US where it's available to pick up as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. This has been such a fun conversation. And for those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Jeff's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening, Jeff. Thank you so much for being here. This was awesome.
Thank you, Scott. Enjoyed it.